It's been a number of days now in this public sector strike, and it's continuing with no end in sight. It's seen the disruption, worryingly, of services at public facilities nationwide, including critical services. Hospitals and clinics certainly bearing the brunt of this industrial action. Let me remind you of the numbers. The workers are demanding a 10% salary increase. Government has come back, only offering 4.7%. We'll get into the numbers in a moment with Labour analyst Terry Bell. Terry, good morning to you. I always appreciate your time. As I said, numbers in a moment, but I'd like to just get your thoughts on the way this is now playing out. It is a sector where people rely on these workers for their very lives, and now, as we heard in our headlines, there could be deaths resulting from this. Is this now going too far?
Far too far. I'm very angry and deeply saddened by it, but it's not a public sector strike. It's a strike by one union in the public sector, the National Education, Health and Allied Workers Union, NEHAWU. It happens to be one of the two biggest unions in the sector, with the PSA, the Public Sector Servants Association. But the point is, it's just NEHAWU. The majority of public sector workers who are organized into unions, the majority are not on strike. And in fact, I think while most of them are probably just as angry as NEHAWU members about the way the government has treated them, they are opposed, I would imagine, to what's been going on. This targeting of the health sector and the thuggish behavior is simply totally unacceptable.
How do we begin to end this, though? Is this a case of government just capitulating just to save people's lives? Because that doesn't sound fair, giving in just like that. But where do you try and find a middle, if there's a middle, Terry, between 10% demand and 4.7% offer?
The 10% demand is from one union that happens to be in the minority. Significantly, this is the same union that in 2018 pushed the majority, just the majority, the bare majority, to accept a 3-year deal, which then the government reneged on in the with the third tranche. So the point is, you just have one union calling for 10%. At the moment, the other unions are at the bargaining table, debating, arguing with government. I've heard some talk about the way government is trying to, well, fiddle the figures a bit by saying 4.7% plus another this or that, which seems to add up to about 7% as a final offer, which would probably be perfectly acceptable to the people in NEHAWU as well. They have to go back to the negotiating table. They've got to talk. No more war talk. Let's get to the table and talk. Why are they on strike when they should be talking? Yes, there may be another strike, and perhaps if government behaves in the arbitrary way it did in the past by simply imposing a 3% wage rise, then perhaps all the unions, don't forget there are 16 unions in the public sector who are gathered together into 8 groups within the bargaining council. So, perhaps if the talks break down or no one is satisfied, there may be another strike, a proper, well-organized strike, not this sort of thing.
How dangerous is this to be striking the way that the NEHAWU workers are, those who are on strike? How dangerous is this for future negotiations? Is this going to tarnish any negotiations between the bargaining council, government, and any employers in the future? Is this quite damaging?
It's very damaging to the trade union movement as a whole. Particularly damaging to NEHAWU, but it's completely tarnished the image of the union movement, because everyone just says, oh, the unions are on strike, the public sector is on strike, the public sector is greedy. The public sector is not, if you look at the way the breakdown of wages. The people at the bottom of the scale, there are jobs not filled. We are 88,000 nurses short. We have a shortage of teachers. We have doctors that have not been appointed, who are not, incidentally, highly paid. At the same time, we have just added another 2 ministers to an already bloated cabinet that is the largest in the world.
Essential workers in a case like this, particularly because, Terry, you brought it up at the top of our conversation, that this is a critical sector, the healthcare sector. Should unions in the healthcare sector be allowed to protest? Essentially, of course, I'm talking about essential workers. Should they be allowed to protest like this?
Well, a long time ago, and I'm going back nearly 20 years, the unions were trying to argue, yes, there are essential services that cannot be fire, health, etc., that should not be closed down. So therefore they ask for, and this applies in other countries as well, a minimum service agreement, which means that you don't close down the ICU, you don't close down accident and emergency, but you have non-essential services are closed down. You don't stop the food trucks from coming into a hospital, that sort of thing. You allow them to come past your picket lines because it's properly organized and you have a minimum service allowed and you work to rule. So that's the way it should be operated. Government has refused consistently to apply this, and I think the unions have stopped asking for it. But also the thing is that if you have an essential service, then those people who are known to be essential service will be known by the union and will be allowed to continue working. That's the way it operates, or should operate. So perhaps they should all go back to the bargaining council, talk about the wages, the housing allowance, and also perhaps talk about introducing a minimum service agreement.
Terry, always a pleasure speaking to you. I appreciate the sage knowledge that you have after all these years of being involved in Labour. It's why we wanted to speak to Terry Bell. As always, it's good to have him with us, Labour analyst here on eNCA, joining us, talking about this now ongoing near Howard strike.